There was a time when one vehicle ruled America's driveways. It hauled the kids, the luggage, the family dog, and maybe even your sanity after a long trip. It was practical, powerful, and proudly suburban. And then it disappeared. Not because it stopped working, but because we stopped wanting it. This is the rise and fall of America's greatest family car, the station wagon. Stick around because by the end of this story, you'll see how the wagon didn't actually die. It just got a new name, a new identity. And it's probably sitting in your driveway right now disguised as something else. From trains to timber, 1910s to 1930s. Believe it or not, the station wagon wasn't born in the suburbs. It was born at the train station. In the early 1900s, people still traveled mostly by rail. When you stepped off with your bags, you needed a ride. Enter the depot hack, a modified truck with benches and cargo space designed to shuttle passengers and luggage from the train to wherever they needed to go. They were rugged, noisy, and crude, but they filled a very real need in an America that was just starting to embrace the automobile. By 1910, Henry Ford, always a step ahead, started selling bare Model T chassis for around $700. Independent companies slapped wooden bodies on them, creating the first true wagons. They were basic, but they offered versatility in a world where most cars couldn't haul both people and gear. By the late 1920s, the Big Three got involved, and in 1929, Ford introduced the Model A station wagon. The name stuck, and so did the concept. These were no longer just taxis, they were multi-purpose vehicles for schools, resorts, and families. The Woody era, prestige with a price, 1930s to 1940s. In the 30s and early 40s, real wood wagons screamed status. They weren't mass-market cars, they were symbols. Resorts bought them. Wealthy families bought them. Ford even built a massive factory in Michigan's Upper Peninsula just to cut and shape lumber from its own forests, shipping wooden wagon bodies to assembly plants across North America. Imagine that, an automaker not just building cars, but harvesting its own timber. But here's the truth, that prestige came at a cost. Owners quickly learned that wood doesn't age gracefully. It warped, cracked, and rotted if not constantly maintained. A Woody wagon demanded you varnish it like a yacht, sand it like furniture, and repair it constantly. These weren't cars for busy families. They were rolling pieces of furniture that looked spectacular but asked for endless care. Chevrolet smelled opportunity. In 1935, they unveiled an all-steel wagon. No varnish, no rot, no endless sanding. But here's the twist. People didn't want it. They loved the wood too much. Prestige mattered more than practicality, at least for a little while longer. Steel wins. Image survives, 1940s to 1950s. After World War II, practicality finally won. In 1946, Willys launched the first family-sized all-steel wagon. Structurally, it was modern, but visually, it still had fake wood panels painted on the sides. Americans weren't ready to let go of that association between wood and wealth. By 1949, Plymouth launched the Suburban, and the end of real wood wagons was sealed. By the mid-1950s, no American automaker was building a true wood-bodied car. The wood that remained was vinyl trim and decals. It was image over reality, a perfect metaphor for mid-century America. Steel wagons were stronger, cheaper to produce, and easier to live with. And with the foundation in place, they were about to become not just practical cars, but cultural icons. Suburbs, interstates, baby boom, the wagon explodes, 1950s to 1970s. The 1950s were rocket fuel for wagons. America was on the move. Suburbs spread outward. The interstate system gave families the freedom to travel further than ever before. And the baby boom meant more kids, more gear, and more reasons to own a bigger car. In 1950, wagons accounted for less than 3% of new cars sold. By the end of the decade, they were pushing 17% of the market. Think about that. In just one decade, wagons went from niche to nearly 1 in 5 cars sold in America. In 1958, the best-selling body style at Plymouth wasn't a sedan, it was the wagon. And these machines weren't small. The 1968 Ford Country Squire stretched more than 18 feet long. For perspective, that's longer than a modern Tahoe. Tailgates came with engineering tricks, swinging out, folding down, or disappearing entirely in GM's clever clamshell design. Some wagons even offered panoramic glass roofs like the Buick Vista Cruiser, decades before panoramic sunroof was a trendy option. Families piled in. Kids fought over the rear-facing third row, making faces at drivers behind them. Parents packed camping gear, groceries, and sports equipment. The wagon wasn't just a car, it was a mobile headquarters for family life. The hidden flaw: great product, bad math. 1970s. On paper, wagons looked unstoppable. Sales were strong, America loved them, and Detroit was churning them out as fast as factories could move. But beneath the numbers was a hidden flaw. Wagons were expensive to build but didn't bring in proportional profits. Compared to sedans, wagons needed longer frames, more steel, heavier suspensions, larger roofs, and bigger windows. Every component cost more. Yet when it came time to price them, automakers couldn't push too high without losing buyers. Sedans, which were simpler and cheaper, often had better profit margins. This wasn't a problem when wagon volumes were huge, but if sales ever dipped, the economics could unravel quickly. And in 1973, that's exactly what happened. 1973, when gas lines killed the dream. The Arab oil embargo sent shockwaves through America. Overnight, the cost of oil jumped nearly 300%. Drivers lined up for hours just to buy gas, often rationed to 10 gallons or less. Some stations even used odd-even license plate rules to control crowds. And there sat the family wagon in the driveway, getting 8 to 12 miles per gallon. Yesterday's dream car suddenly looked like a ball and chain. Sales nosedived. By 1974 and 1975, wagon numbers had collapsed. Chrysler gave up on full-size wagons entirely by 1978. Meanwhile, new emissions regulations strangled the power out of V8s, leaving wagons underpowered and still thirsty. The wagon wasn't dead yet, but it was wounded, and the killers were already waiting in the wings. The minivan revolution, 1980s. In 1984, Chrysler pulled off a miracle. Barely alive as a company, it introduced the Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager, the world's first modern minivans. The formula was genius. More room than a wagon in a shorter footprint. Sliding doors that made getting kids in and out easy. Higher driving positions for better visibility. Car-based platforms for a smoother ride. And they were affordable. For families, the minivan was everything a wagon had promised, only better packaged. And culturally, it mattered too. Baby boomers who had grown up riding in the back of wagons wanted something new. Wagons were tied to conformity and old-fashioned suburbia. The minivan felt fresh, modern, and smarter. The wagon was already stumbling. The minivan shoved it closer to the edge. The SUV finishes the job, 1990s. If the minivan stole the wagon's practicality crown, the SUV stole its image. The Jeep Cherokee in 1984 changed everything. Unlike earlier Broncos or Wagoneers, the Cherokee had 4 doors, modern styling, and car-like drivability. It was marketed as a lifestyle vehicle. You weren't just buying transportation, you were buying adventure, freedom, and rugged capability. Even if your adventure was just a trip to Costco. By the 1990s, SUVs like the Ford Explorer and Toyota 4Runner exploded in popularity. And here's the dirty little secret. SUVs had looser fuel economy standards than cars. Automakers could sell vehicles with worse miles per gallon than wagons, but face less regulatory punishment. Even better, they could build an SUV for maybe $1,000 more than a wagon and sell it for $5,000 to $10,000 more. The economics were irresistible. If you were running a car company, which would you build? SUVs or wagons? Exactly. By the mid-1990s, wagons were gone. From a million strong to museum piece, 2000s. By 1996, the last full-size American wagons, the Caprice, Roadmaster, and Olds Custom Cruiser, were discontinued. The Taurus wagon limped into the mid-2000s before dying in 2005. Ford's Focus wagon was gone by 2008. By the early 2000s, wagons were a niche product in America. The few that remained were often rebadged versions of one another, sold in tiny numbers. To most Americans, wagons were relics of their parents' and grandparents' generation. The wagon, once a million-strong seller, had become a museum piece. The irony, we still buy wagons, we just lift them. And here's the twist. Wagons didn't really die. They just got taller. Crossovers like the Honda CR-V, Toyota RAV4, and Subaru Forester are, in truth, wagons on stilts. Car-based platforms, rear hatches, seating for 5 or 7, cargo capacity. They check all the wagon boxes, but with a few inches more ground clearance and some rugged styling. Subaru cracked the code first with the 1994 Outback. It was literally a legacy wagon with cladding and a lift kit, but marketed as something fresh and adventurous. Americans loved it. Today, it's one of Subaru's best sellers. Meanwhile, Europeans still build wagons, Audi Avants, Volvo Estates, BMW Tourings, but in America, they sell in tiny numbers. Attempts at revival like the Cadillac CTS Sport Wagon or Buick Regal Tour X failed miserably. Americans chose SUVs instead. What we lost. So what did we lose when wagons died? Practicality. A proper wagon could carry lumber, camping gear, and 9 people all in one package. Crossovers come close, but few can match the utility of those old land yachts. Character. Fake wood paneling, Vista Cruiser skylights, funky tailgates, wagons had personality. Today's SUVs, too many look alike like sedans that hit the gym. Culture. Wagons defined family life. Road trips, way-back seats, license plate bingo. They were more than transportation. They were memory machines. Lessons of the wagon. The wagon story teaches us three things. Americans buy image, not logic. Wagons were practical. SUVs felt adventurous. Guess which one won? Regulations matter. CAF standards strangled wagons but gave SUVs a loophole. The unintended consequence was an SUV boom. Nothing is permanent. Wagons went from 17% of the market to almost zero in one generation. SUVs could face the same fate someday. Could they come back? Could wagons make a comeback? Realistically, no. Our culture, infrastructure, and even ego are tied to taller vehicles. Parking spaces are sized for SUVs, drive-thrus are built for them, and Americans love the command seating position. If fuel prices ever soar, maybe wagons get a second look. But more likely, automakers will just make sleeker, smaller SUVs and sell them as compact crossovers. Ironically, electric vehicles could bring back the wagon shape. Lower, longer, and more aerodynamic cars make more sense for batteries and range. But they won't be called wagons. They'll be called something else, anything to avoid the stigma. The station wagon may be gone, but its spirit lives on. It's hiding in your crossover, in your SUV, maybe even in your minivan. But what it represented, optimism, family, and practicality, is something no modern badge can fully replace. So let me ask you, what's your wagon memory? Was it a country squire with fake wood, a Volvo 240 that never quit, or maybe a Vista Cruiser with skylights? Drop it in the comments, I'd love to hear your stories. And if you want to see which vehicles today actually live up to the wagon's promise of durability, check out my video on the most reliable cars that never break down. It's right here, and I think you'll be shocked at which models still deliver that same spirit of buy once, drive forever practicality.